Well, in the last video, we once again looked at the whole story of the Bible. And this time we did so through the angle of what are called covenants. If you remember, these covenants are like partnerships that God enters into between creation and himself. The first covenant was with a man named Noah. And then there came another covenant with Abraham. And then with the line of Abraham, the people that became known as the nation of Israel. And then finally, there was a covenant with their great king, King David. And in each case, the terms of the covenant were roughly the same. God promised that he was going to bless these people, and that through them, he was going to bring about his plan of blessing to all nations. And in return, what God asked from the people is that they would live faithfully to him, that they would follow his ways and live in justice and righteousness in the world. But in each case, the Bible tells a story where the people that are involved in the covenants, they fail miserably. And page after page, it seems like the whole project is a total disaster. But in the midst of this disaster, as we saw, what God does is he raises up these group of people. They're known as the prophets. You can almost say they're like preachers with a message from God. And they begin to speak about a time when God is going to restore or make right all of these broken partnerships. They said effectively that someone was coming, someone who would live faithfully to the terms of these covenants, someone who would live in righteousness, and someone who would in turn bring about blessing to all nations. This someone, they said, was going to come from the line of Abraham. He was going to come from the people of Israel, and more specifically, he was going to come from King David's very line. And as I say, this someone is going to faithfully live out what Israel, it seemed, could not do. This someone is going to establish a kingdom of righteousness and justice in David's line, a kingdom that will last for all time, a kingdom that will be for all nations, and a kingdom just like the one, effectively, that had been promised in and through David. And so when we turn then the page into what is called the New Testament, we learn that this someone is, of course, Jesus. Jesus is the king from the line of David who is going to live out Israel's promises. He's going to be faithful in a way that Israel never could. And it's from this King David, or this King Jesus, that the promise of blessing is going to come to all people. Well, now we turn then to this week's teaching that we're going to watch. And it's fitting that we're talking about Jesus being a king, because that's exactly what this teaching is all about. Once again, we're going to look at the whole story of the Bible, and this time, once again, from another angle. This time, we're going to see how the Bible, from the very beginning, is anticipating the arrival of a future king, this someone who is called a Messiah. Messiah is a word that means anointed one, but when it's translated into Greek, it literally means Christ, or when it's translated to Greek, it becomes the word Christ. So when we say Jesus Christ, we're effectively saying Jesus and his title Christ, which is Jesus is the Messiah, Jesus is the anointed one that the scriptures has been anticipating. And this someone, this king, sits right at the very heart of God's plan to rescue all people, to fulfill God's covenants, and to bring blessing to a nation or to a creation that has been marred. And as you'll see, this story of rescue, this story of blessing, begins again way back in a garden. But this time we meet another character, and the character that we meet in the garden is a snake. But we also see in the garden that there's a promise. Now, if that sounds strange, you need to watch on. And as you do, my hunch is that you're going to start to recognize many of these storylines that exist throughout the Bible. I think the pieces should now be starting at least a little to fall into place. Now, one thing I want you to think about as you watch this week's teaching. Do you ever think about the problem of evil in the world? Of course you do. I mean, we are confronted by it every single day, it seems, in the news. Big evil. But there's also the problem of evil, I think we can all recognize, that exists in our heart in small ways or sometimes in big ways. Why is it there? Why is it in you? Why Why is it in your family? Why is it in your neighbors? Why is it in your coworkers? Why is there this issue within us? And is there a remedy? What is the plan of God for hearts that, as we saw a couple of weeks ago, seem to be so often marred? And with that, let's watch this week's teaching.